Welcome to the Tokenomics DAO Podcast. We're recording this episode with Javi. This is our first guest on the podcast. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this goes. So maybe could you give us a quick intro on who you are, why you started this, and then maybe walk us through Valorize. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Javier Gonzalez. Originally, I studied as an architect, and I was practicing that for a while. But I was always really interested in this. Within architecture, I was interested in urban design and sort of community building, and community planning and neighborhood redevelopment and things like that, right? And also, I was very interested in the software that we were using to design buildings and to design neighborhoods and cities. So my interest led me to learn programming to interact with that software better. And there's this kind of movement right now of using computational ideas in the design of buildings, so like generative buildings and stuff like that. So I got kind of sucked into that a little bit, and that's how I learned programming. And then eventually my free time was heavily skewing towards programming instead of architecture. And then when I was living in Guatemala at the time, and I got laid off from my work, and I was spending a lot of time programming. And then to the point where I decided to kind of give it a shot as my full-time thing. And I was able to connect through a friend of a friend to get me a position with a testing automation framework, and building that out, automating all the parts of the back end to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. And I did that for a while. All this time, I had already been introduced to cryptocurrency. Actually, I've been into crypto since around 2014. The right after the pump of when it went from $1 to $1,000 Bitcoin. Ethereum wasn't even a thing. So this whole time I thought I always had this idea that I was gonna sort of reconnect what I was studying to be, which was architecture and cryptocurrencies, because I saw a lot of potential for reframing how we do a lot of things, how real estate gets built, and architects are kind of more of these service providers, as opposed to people that have real ownership in the things that they end up making. They're kind of just they're not a necessity, and they don't put a lot of skin in the game and into the price. So I always had a lot of ideas of how I would connect that to cryptocurrency. But then as I got more and more into programming, and then I got this opportunity to work as a developer, then I started tinkering with programming on a new level, or tinkering with cryptocurrencies on a new level, just programming them. And by that time, this was 2017, 2018. Ethereum was much more mature than when I first ran into it. When I first heard about it, it was Solidity didn't even exist. The programming language didn't exist. So it matured eventually, and by the time I got into it, it was a little more palatable. And I've been doing software development and crypto development, and this is what I've been doing sort of full time for a little over a year.
Yeah, that's super cool. I always like the people that are self-taught on this, because they're the most passionate, because they they're really following this curiosity and passion to get into something. So that's, those are probably the best developers. I learned it back then, and I was never really passionate about development. So I quickly found out that I'm not that good. So I kind of stopped it.
It's interesting. It becomes, I guess my temperament, it becomes obsessive over solving some of these problems. So if I'm I have a good mind for a developer, because if I have a problem, it consumes me, and it's just, development is the art of making problems for yourself to solve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
there's this meme. Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
But anyway, so then I started working on this project. This was when on Valorize, right, which is what I've been working on lately, which was I was noticing, I kind of realized that, every I do believe that everything is going to have its like a token. Like the tokens are kind of the basic unit of the Web3, right? So where you had websites in Web2, or like social media profiles, you could say, or like whatever. Like everyone has their own web page, you know, has someplace in the web in the web where it represents them. I think tokens are going to have a similar role in this new web that we're making. And so I started getting into how to design them. I started reading a lot on tokenomics, and just became like this really fascinating subject of how you create incentives in the system that will create certain outcomes based on the incentives, but you're not designing like the outcomes, right? Like you're not creating a piece of furniture that you plan it and then this is what it's going to look like in the end, and you know, you craft it. You're creating a kind of the initial conditions for a complex adaptive system to evolve into this greater thing. And I found that so fascinating.
And you don't know what's going to happen, right? It's kind of like
exactly.
You're like building this like DNA, and then you don't know what's going to evolve or what's going to happen.
With that. And that really attracted me. And that had a lot of similarities with how when we were doing urban planning and neighborhood planning in urban design, right? You create a zone for business, and you choose that based on some inputs, right? Like flow of traffic, and you know, you create it to encourage individuals to feel a certain way when they're there, that will be more likely to lead to certain outcomes that will eventually build up into like a vibrant neighborhood, right? Like you try to create the initial conditions with the right incentives so that the outcome, you know, 10 years in the future is similar to what you had in mind. And you can never quite, like, it's not really yours to do, but you're kind of creating the skeleton for it to develop.
But you don't know, right? That's super cool.
And
like that.
So I made this platform, and I wanted to explore that. And this was when, you know, everyone, and I guess we're still in this moment, right, where everyone is trying to, is the word DAO sort of all of a sudden became kind of popular. You know, NFTs were becoming really popular, and then there were sort of a lot of DeFi projects became DAO. So we decided to. And this is, you know, Friends with Benefits was coming out, and Bankless and all these social DAOs too. So we made this platform that would allow anyone to make their own token, right? And specifically their governance token. There was other platforms to make token, but as far as, you know, and you can get away, but I wanted to focus on tokens that are designed for governance, that are designed for creating some of these incentives that we're just talking about.
Yeah. So like, you know, you kind of, the target audience would be like a group of people that want to start a DAO, and they want to launch their DAO token in a way, right? So that they can like govern the whole thing. And so then, well, at least that's what I found out on the website, kind of like you have like a whole bunch of different templates that you give, or at least you're working on some, right? It's kind of early, but you have these templates that then can be used to spin this up into various different directions. And I really like that idea, because obviously that's something we try to do at the Tokenomics DAO, is kind of find out what different models can be used within different communities, right? So I just wrote like this article on Bankless DAO. I did this like Tokenomics 101 article, and that kind of goes into how they work, how they've designed their governance token. And that could be a certain template, but Friends with Benefits, they have a different template, or Tokenomics DAO might have a different one. So how are you thinking about like prioritizing and working with these like different token or governance model templates?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we saw is that the variation out in the wild wasn't that crazy, right? Like, especially for these social DAOs. And, you know, ENS and Friends with Benefit and Bankless, they have a very similar model, right? It's like, it's, and I don't know like the differences off the top of my head, but for example, ENS, you know, you have an initial supply, an inflation rate over time, and like the tool to airdrop the token. The airdrop mechanism is built into the token itself. And that's kind of it. Like, it has another thing, like ENS, for example, has like delegated voting built into the contract. It doesn't have to be built into the contract the same way that the airdrop doesn't have to be built into the contract. So we just kind of took the template from that and like parameterized it. So it's basically, the one of the first tokens that we made and that is working now is, you set your initial supply, you set all the sort of administrative roles. You have like the kind of the roles functionality built into the contract. Then you set an initial supply, a supply that you want to airdrop, and then you set like and you decide if you want to mint more tokens in the future and at what rate do you want to mint them. Basically, how many tokens do you want to mint every X amount of time?
Yeah. So that's like the I guess like the first template that you have, and then so somebody can come into the platform, they choose the template, they configure that, and then they can choose a different ecosystem. Like, could they choose like to launch this like on Ethereum or Polygon, or what other chains do you support?
Yeah. Mostly Ethereum and Polygon. We've
like
been
Solidity
dealing
because
with.
That's what you do your smart contracts in.
Yeah, EVM compatible. The nice thing about it is that our application is actually, we're a tool for putting things on chain, and we check it and stuff like that. So it's actually not incredibly difficult to add a new chain. We just have to basically point it to a new RPC provider. But as we're building out,
as long as
more,
it's EVM compatible.
Yeah, exactly. And so as long as and at its current state, we're pretty lean with our on-chain operations. So it's kind of easy to move to a bunch of different chains, and we're building it with the idea that you'll choose which chain to point to, and then we'll facilitate to do that. But EVM is it's a nice system because all these chains choose to adopt it, because then I can just point my contract there and the same.
You could like deploy stuff on Avalanche or others that have EVM compatibility. Yeah. Okay. And then like once that's done, what's kind of the thinking on how adjustable that is, like configurable that is? Like if you say we do want to do something with that token, do you have any tooling that supports kind of like the how do you call it, like the after launch support or something?
So the way that we built the tool, it allows you to continuously give airdrops in your token. And that's nice because in the token contract that you get from us, right? Like this is it's Web3, right? So you actually own the contract. You are the administrator that can pull the levers, right? Like I have no control. I can't go in the back and just activate something because it's kind of up to you. And so you have the ability to give like a sort of endless amount of airdrops. Some of these token contracts tend to only have one airdrop for some reason, like the initial distribution, whereas we just extended that to N airdrops, and then like little tools to manage, tools to add administrators and remove them and sort of look at the supply and there's a small dashboard that we do plan on improving as time goes by.
So maybe I'll just bring this in right now, because yesterday we've been having this idea for a time, and I've also seen this like in another ecosystem. They did it with a database, but I think like what a lot of communities have that are just launching, or especially for us, we said that we don't want to rush our tokenomics and launching our token. So we want to take our time with like defining that and thinking that through, like maybe build the community and what we want to build first, and see how we want to create value, and then put the token on the back of that. It just made more sense to us. But a problem that arises from that is that you don't really have a mechanism to reward people. So currently in Tokenomics DAO, we've got a lot of people that are contributing, but they don't get anything for it. They're just like anticipating something in the future, maybe. And the way I kind of keep track of that is like, I've got the spreadsheet and I put Discord names into it, like from if somebody did something, right? But that's not really Web3. So I was thinking, and I sent you this idea yesterday. And so I just wanted to briefly bring it up. Like, did you have any ideas or on how you could do this, like a dummy token that you could maybe distribute, and you could just like, it's this like super basic thing. You'll just mint 100,000 tokens, and then one address can distribute them via tipping, maybe in Discord. And that way you can kind of get people rewarded before you actually have your real token. I don't know if others would really use it, but just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a good idea. And this is the progression that I've seen other people take, right? Where like the initial, you get the token out there and you build up something nice. And I forget, someone was sharing this case study of someone that used one of these token launchers to create their initial token. They got traction. Then eventually, they moved to their version 2, right? And like this mechanism of like burning a token to mint the upgraded version of the token is kind of like a well trodden path for improving the kind of the underlying asset, right? And so yeah, it gives you a few benefits to start tracking things on chain. First of all, it accelerates the learning, right? Because you're already sort of testing this tipping and this culture and how that's being distributed inside your organization right away. So that's much better. And as you plan to decentralize and this more roadmap to progressive decentralization, then not being kind of the one that is keeping track of everything on a spreadsheet and the people are relying on you to do that. And even if it's like a publicly auditable spreadsheet, it gets hairy. But the truth is that you're gonna rely on some sort of mechanism for distributing these tokens no matter what. So you can't really get away from someone evaluating the value of a contribution in.
That's true. Yeah.
So there going to be that element.
That's something we can get to later, but I think that's a really interesting topic. Like, how do you evaluate contributions?
Yeah. And then the one thing that you will have to deal with is the confusion that it might cost to have like an upgraded token, which you see out in the wild. And people, if you have one token, and is that token going to remain having voting power in the future? And how that transition is, or do you put like a date where it deprecates? And you could actually build that into the contract where it's like basically it freezes after this year, and maybe
you can't do anything with it. Yeah. This is so cool. Like I think there's so many things that you like with this like tooling could provide, right? Like that you could sort of like build out in the years to come. So what else is like on the roadmap that you're thinking through? Maybe like different governance token models or other tools. What have you got there in this area?
Yeah, so we're actually, at its current state, we have so many ideas, right? Like dashboards and improved models and whatever. But in its realistic sense, we're looking to let sort of community tell us what is going to be the most valuable thing that we can build. Yeah. So we're being sort of cautiously, sort of conservative on building too much of the thing or like pointing like what is going to be the future of the organization. We have a lot of tools. We have a lot of tools and resources to actually build stuff out, but we haven't sort of committed to what is going to be the roadmap as it is right now. One thing that is, at its current state is currently you have to talk to us to actually, so we're live, we're in beta, but you have to talk to us to actually go through the process of launching a token. And that's been incredibly useful. It's also been incredibly time consuming. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you that it's not the lack of tools to create a token, that people don't have the lack of tools to create a token. People have the lack of expertise to make the decisions of what the token should be, right? So in reality, we're actually doing a lot of sort of consulting with our customers. But the idea is to basically make it this really gentle experience that allows you to make these decisions by yourself, in this kind of automated way where you focus on one question at a time, and you have all the resources to answer that question yourself without having to talk to someone, always having the option of talking to someone, because we do have a really nice community of contributors that are helping and that are really knowledgeable. But like have the ability and the confidence that you've made all the decisions for what you're trying to do correctly, right? And that's a hard thing to balance, not overwhelm people with information and and this decision. As I'd say, like going into the future, I would definitely like to see more. There's two things that I'm really excited with Valorize to happen. One is to increase the rate of experimentation that we have with, at least even with these parameters, like we've talked about, and I'm sure we'll get into, like this rate of issuance and how people tend to give like a 2% inflation rate, and I do it in air quotes because it's not inflation, right? It's the increase in supply, not the increase in the price of anything. But that is, I think there's a lot of room to play, and even with just playing with the rate of increase in supply, I think you can create really interesting sort of incentives for contributors. And so I would like to see a lot more experimentation in people using these tools, and then I would love to come up with better sort of base templates. Like I said, the first templates that we grabbed were kind of doing a survey of what was out there already and making an accessible version for people that want to launch their own token. Now, the next version, which I would like to see from us, is taking the learnings that we've had from the communities that have built a token through us, and make it, improve it, and sort of lead towards a standard for governance tokens. Right?
So like two things, like, or start with this one first, maybe. Like you're talking about the community, like how does the whole community thing work? I know you're kind of a DAO as well, or at least you're working towards that. What are your plans on that, and how would say like the community decide on new features? So if I wanted to go through with this like dummy token idea, how can I influence that? Where do I buy tokens and then vote for it, or like put up a proposal? Like what's your current setup and structure there?
Yeah, currently we're also pre-token. The reason we're doing that, we have all the tools to launch a token, and it's funny that we're pre-token right now. But we're a bit early. We're waiting a little bit because we're gonna actually do an NFT project that is gonna allow us to build a community, and we're working with some really interesting people that are very experienced in the NFT space, and that's a really exciting exercise in community building, because you create like this whole, we have some really talented storytellers and stuff and people like that. So we're gonna go with like this, we're gonna basically shape the culture, or like the future, what we stand for, and hoping to attract a lot of talent and some capital there that we're gonna reward with kind of like the seed funding for us is gonna hopefully come from this. So we'll see how that actually goes. It's interesting, right? Like in the NFT world, usually it's like you first start with a project, you come up with like several like figures of ether, like a quite significant amount of ether, and then you decide what you're going to do later, and it's kind of like, it is a seed funding for this community in some sense. So we're trying to see if we can tap into that and be, and sort of reward the people that give us that seed funding with, at least with governance power, and see how we can do that as kind of like crowdfunding, right? So we're waiting until that's finalized to release our token. We made that decision collectively. So right now it's basically, I like how you put it in Tokenomics DAO, which is this proof of work. It's a meritocracy at its current state. It's like people come in, everyone's welcome to come in and contribute. And if you have ideas, we'll help you shape it to the community. And we have a large community of, like, let's say, in the Discord, I don't know how many hundreds of people there are, but in reality, the active people is like a dozen people that are doing it with different levels of involvement. And so it's quite easy, like if you have some ideas and you want to talk through them, to just be like the path to getting heard in this community it's not cumbersome, and I don't feel like at its current state there is no sort of need for this extremely formal process. We do have that, and we have pushed for proposals that way, and it's really just people that have people that have contributed have one vote at its current state. We definitely want to move towards a more on-chain process that executes automatically and does things like that.
Yeah. And that's certainly like because you're early, right? Because it's just very young. So that people can still come in and say like, hey, I'd like to do this. And then there's people that hang around and that like are keen to work on that and do that. So maybe I'll launch that proposal then in the community and see how that goes. I'll try that after the podcast. So on the topic of experimentation, that's something like I'm super keen on like, you know, and I haven't really thought this through, but I just thought like maybe you had some ideas on it, because usually when you launch a token, it's often like pretty set, right? So it's out there and there's not too many things you can do, right? You maybe have a little bit of emission that you can deal with. You can burn buybacks, stuff like that. But you can't really change the fundamentals of it. And since you said like experimentation, do you have any thoughts on that? Because it would be cool if you could sort of like take the token and replace it for a completely different model, but that's a really hard thing to pull off if you have like if it's like out in the wild and distributed, right? So how could you do this experimentation?
Yeah, I mean that is the question, right? And like, I mean, in a technical level, you can just create a proxy contract. That's not how we designed our tokens, right? We designed it like with basically it would have to be a consensus from token holders to decide to move to a new contract. That would be the only way to sort of upgrade the underlying mechanics if you want to really change it. So I mean, it's similar to, I guess, a hard fork would be a similar thing, or like choosing a new client. Like miners would have to decide to go to this new client. It would be people would have to decide to upgrade their token to the new version. And like you basically, I mean, the thing with like full self-sovereignty of the underlying assets is that you can't force people to do things. And so even though it's like quote unquote your token, which it's not, right? It's actually the community's token. Whoever owns it is a guaranteed owner based on the design of the system. So it is tough. People like sometimes we talk about software development in the Web 2 world as in this move fast, break things model. And in the Web 3 world is more like this hardware model of like, okay, let's make sure we get this right at first. And because once we doing a recall is like a whole process, right? So we can't afford to do that kind of thing. But we do have to be like an
incentive, you know, like to move to the next iteration of the token model. Something like, you know, if you swap your tokens and burn your tokens for the new one in the first couple of weeks or so, then you get like a bonus when you do it and you move to the new token model that you may have. I don't know, like I don't think a lot of communities have tried this in general.
Yeah, or presumably, right? Like the new model is significantly better, right? And it's a matter of explaining to the people. The hard part is that, you know, it quickly gets away from you, especially if it gets any kind of market traction, right? And if it starts being traded and starts being speculated on, then it's really hard to even know who's an owner of the token, and they might not even be wary of like the official channels of communication. Yeah,
exactly. They might not be sticking around on Discord all day.
So for example, Storage Coin, they and I think Golem token, which is like they were really cool back in the day, like 2017 bull run was like the ones that people were talking about, and they're not so much governance tokens, they're more of like the protocol token to pay for using their protocol.
Utility.
But I think they both went through a process of upgrading the contract, and they just basically left. It's like, you know, one storage coin will grant you one new version of storage coin in perpetuity. So there is absolutely no rush to do it. Like you can always, you know, move to this new model. Yeah. And if you, for example, if the DAO moves to this new governance system where only the new token is going to be the one that gives governance decisions, then, you know, people can upgrade, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. There has to be something at the end that is better for the user or for the holder of the token that makes it worth moving on. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I guess like one thing, when we had a quick chat to discuss this this podcast, you sent me this document, and it was like on token governance voting, and it was like super interesting for me because I read through it, and then when I got to the end of the document, I was like, hey, I just came up with the same idea, and I had written an article that's now published about the same thing, kind of like about this, or a very similar idea, right? It's around like this proof of work that we have, or that we are thinking about, right? So that you have like in our community, what we try to have is that we produce content, and that content then becomes kind of the center of gravity for new people to come in, but also for like client requests that then generate revenue for us via consulting. And that will then feed again the community knowledge, and that can then feed it back into content again. So you have like this circular or this flywheel thing where that all enforces. And we were thinking about like, how do we make sure that people don't just go to consulting, but also work on content, like producing more content, because that's actually going to bring us in more consulting gigs. But if people only focus on consulting where the revenue is, it's not gonna really help. So I kind of thought like, why don't we create this like token, proof of work token, that you get for creating a piece of content. So you get this token, and it could be like an indefinite supply of it, but you somehow would have to measure how you would distribute it to people. Let's say someone creates an article, they get a certain amount of tokens. Somebody does a nice podcast, he gets a certain amount of tokens. And these tokens would then pay a piece of the revenue that we get from consulting, right? So that would make it worth holding that token. And these tokens could also, in a way, like give people governance rights, so give them voting power, because we want the people to be voting that are actually active. We don't want the people to be voting or like to be in there that like don't do anything or have no involvement. But the people that are actually like right in the middle of the machine, they should be the ones. And I thought that was a cool idea, and you thought that was a cool idea too. So that was kind of really interesting. So what were your thoughts behind that?
Right. I mean, the idea really came when people were asking me like, what, I built the initial parameters and of the Valorize token, which was taken like inspired by ENS and Bankless and stuff, where they had a 2% issuance rate, and that was sort of on chain, determined by it's like governed on chain. There's 2% issuance rate is true because in the blockchain that's how it works, right? Like in the contract, that's the code. And so people were asking me like, what should be the issuance rate? And I realized that 2% doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, wait, I'm sure that the reason that they chose 2% was only because that's the inflation rate that the Federal Reserve has for the consumer price index. Like they don't want prices to inflate over 2%. I'm pretty sure that's where they came up with that number, right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, this isn't money. And so I was struggling to find like a really good reason to do it. And the only thing that I had that made sense is, people were like, oh, when I was thinking through it, I was saying, well, the thing, if you go too high, is like that you'll devalue early people, right? That have the token. And the reason that would make sense would be like, if you want to kind of keep governance power, like you might want to dilute early people that have the token, or someone that acquires a big portion of the token. And the more I kept thinking about it, it's like, wait, why aren't we thinking about like diluting, people? And, in Vitalik's article, the name of the article that I wrote is Back to Token Voting Governance. Yeah. And this is in response to an article that Vitalik wrote about against coin voting governance, I think was his, right? And so one of his biggest criticism with token voting was that, malicious takeover can happen, and that someone can accumulate a big part of the token, and then they can create malicious decisions. But if you have a really high inflation rate, you can actually sort of dilute the voting power that they have over time. So it takes a lot more effort to maintain a sort of a majority stake in the token if you also as well if you have a high inflation rates. So I started thinking of like the more I started thinking about it, the more I was wondering why no one's experimented with like a 100% year over year inflation token, or or increase in supply. Like every year the supply doubles, and then what I started realizing is that, well, you could think of each doubling period of the supply of the token as a kind of halving of the value of a contribution, right? So if someone contributes something today, and then 1 year the supply of the token is going to double, if they have 10% today, in next year they're only going to have 5% of the supply of the token. And then next year is 2.5% of the token. And so it's like the half-life of the value of a contribution. So their voting rate is going to it's going to continuously go down as more supply gets issued, unless they keep being valuable. And then like that actually just seemed like a better system, right? Like only actively valuable members in a community get to decide on the outcome of the community. And if you're really valuable in the beginning, then that's great, but that value is going to be diminished over time and in favor of the people that are currently providing the value. And this is only the case. This only works if you kind of put aside this idea that you want to favor like the unit price of the token. If you want the price of the token to remain high over time, if you want the number to go up continuously, then this is sort of antithetical to that.
Don't do that.
But if you want to be a successful tool in helping your community coordinate, then this is actually quite a good solution, right? And so now we're thinking through how we might reintroduce a kind of a token that doesn't lose. How do we pair this with a second token that doesn't lose so much of the value, which I think is similar to the solution that you were also thinking.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like our idea wasn't to have it as inflationary, basically. So I think it could do both, but then if it isn't as inflationary, then you wouldn't have the benefits of this dilution that you discussed, right? And I think the dilution is really something that keeps people on their feet, like just contributing, right? Because they know that if they don't, next year they'll have like less access to voting power. But what I also thought about was like these like rewards. Maybe you could use them to you'll get into securities things and we'll have to talk about and discuss that. But let's say just you could do it and it was all fine. Let's say you had like a dividend of the revenue that your DAO makes, and you could just distribute that to the entirety of the share of the token holders, right? But the tokens would just increase with every piece of value that you add to the whole thing, i.e. for us, that would be the content that would be created. So your piece of dividends that you would get paid every year would like get lower if you don't do anything. But if you keep doing, you could keep it up. You could keep it up there, right? Ideally, I mean, that's like the theory that I'm thinking for. And like the same as for yours, I really think this would help us to keep a community engaged. And that's kind of what I see as the benefits. Because in the end, the unit price or whatever, the unit doesn't represent anything. Like if you're prioritizing the governance, the one unit only matters in relation of like what is the total number of units. So if you're constantly, inflation isn't the problem. It's increasing the monetary supply in a regular system isn't problematic if it's evenly distributed to everyone, right? Then it's kind of like just random numbers on the screen, right? Like if the Federal Reserve today was had 100% inflation, but it was giving it directly to everyone, then your money would keep going down, would keep increasing, and buying power of money would go down, but it doesn't matter because your money is increasing, right? So it's kind of like it's not a perfect. You go to the people with the hard goods, right? It will flow to where the stuff is that you can't print more of, and that's what you'll always see, right? In this scenario, I guess.
Yeah, but Yeah, so like there's this idea, right, the Cantillon effect, where inflation is bad because it gets the people in the top, it gets to the people in the top first, and then it dilutes into the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. And that's really the problem. The people at the bottom don't get to experience the benefits of increasing, of shocking the system with a injection of money, right? It's only the people that are closest to the source of the flow of money, or the creation of the money, that get to the benefit. By the time it gets to you and I, right, if we're not buying assets and you know, if we're just regular people working paycheck to paycheck, by the time inflation reaches us, you know, it's already like the effect of it is much more negative. So but if it was given to us, the price of things would go up, and by the time our salary goes up, everything has gone up like way higher than the increase in our salary. Right. But if the money went directly to us, then it wouldn't be that much of a problem, right? And I'm not advocating that as a monetary policy, but as a policy of who gets more votes in a community, that actually makes sense, because like what you're doing is, you know, your share of the total amount of votes is what really matters. And then like you're saying, it keeps people sort of incentivized to remain active in the community, and also it makes it quite a hard process to have like a majority stake to be a malicious actor in that community, and it's really hard to maintain that unless you're having to keep putting more money in, as opposed to like, well, you know, with equity and things like that, where it disproportionately benefits early holders, this disproportionately benefits currently active members, which is what you would want for governance.
Like the thing though that I'm thinking about is like, since you're like pumping out these tokens, you're just minting new tokens all the time, and those give you governance rights. And if the price, if they're not designed for a high price or for an increasing price, which they're probably not, then someone could just go in, like scoop up all these tokens. The question is like where you would find that equilibrium of like so a malicious actor to buy all these tokens to gain voting power because they're so cheap, he would just keep on buying them, right? Versus him with all this buying action out competing the supply and actually driving the price up, and then making it harder for him. It's like that's probably something that where I'd like to maybe see some modeling on this. Not that I can do it, but I'd love to have somebody maybe go through this and see how, at what point is like the right rate of inflation and buying power, and what would like a malicious actor do in this scenario?
It's an interesting model, but it's what it makes sense in some sense, but it's such a different way of thinking, because we tend to associate this, we give this what's the word, the skeuomorphic qualities, right? Like we tend to think of tokens as either money or securities, right? Like, because those are the closest things that we have to associate with them. But it's actually this third thing, and especially if it's like a governance token. What my goal was with that article, it was not a full-on proposal. It was just kind of a challenge to think of, what would a governance, like if you wanted to create a governance token from first principles, what would be the things that you'd be prioritizing, and how could you think about
like a pure
about
governance token?
Purely governance token, which is what some DAOs have been forced to say that their token is, right? Because
but none of them are. I think that's the biggest problem, right? All of them say that their token is a governance token for SEC reasons in the US, but they're not. Like they're actually hiding the fact, like in like plain sight, right? They're hiding the fact that they're actually there to make money with these tokens.
It's an interesting dynamic, but it's almost like the SEC doesn't, there's no law in the SEC against reselling Minecraft money or Warcraft money or whatever, just as there's no crime, like it's not a crime if you use your airline miles to Well, actually, it might be. I don't know. Don't take my word for it. But
Yeah,
I don't think it's illegal to grab your airline miles and sell them to someone or buy a ticket for someone. The system might not allow it, whatever. But I don't think it's a crime, right? And so effectively, when people grab some of these tokens and create a liquidity pool for them in Uniswap, that they're creating a market value for these tokens, but they're not. It's as long as the kind of the people that are issuing it and that are creating it and that are attached to the project kind of wash their hands of saying like, hey, you might make money with this, which is what the SEC wants to technically, right? Like that's what supposedly they're protecting, is like people making money, promising returns, not backing
Ponzi schemes, or pyramid schemes and stuff like that. Yeah, I guess like that is really the interesting part, because in my mind I was questioning like, why has nobody come up with this same token model or with a token model like that? And I think the reason is really that whenever you create your token, you have to sort of hide it as a governance token, because otherwise you're going to get like flagged, and they're going to look into this. And so people are just like worried about it. But if that problem wouldn't exist, and you could just go out there and create like this dividend token without any regulation, then I guess there would exist a lot of these two token models, I think, with like purely governance token like the one you proposed.
Yeah, it's cool. Like we now live in a world where an 11-year-old can come up with a contract, a smart contract, and code it up in their spare time and like play with tweak the valves and then issue like a new synthetic asset that's never existed before and might have really interesting emergent properties once you put that into the wild. And like, if you build a community of people that want it, like what is the outcome of that? And so the rate of the rate at which we can experiment is much higher than the sort of the framework in which we're experimenting. And there's an interesting tension. And I mean, I know why the SEC is like being so conservative in what they're trying to do, but also like they are definitely stunting a lot of things. And unfortunately, it's sort of a worldwide, their reach is far enough that worldwide it's kind of an issue.
The regulators have trouble to catch up with the rate of innovation that's happening, I guess. And I don't know what they're going to do, and every country is a little bit different there. So I think the pressure is also in a way on the United States, because they know that if they don't have good regulations, then a lot of this innovation will go to other countries, right? Especially here in crypto, like because it's so easy to do, to source people from elsewhere and set up shop in a different jurisdiction. Then you just do it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, right, like at this rate, if the US is going to be, creating a regulatory environment where, the kind of experiments that I'm really excited about doing are going to be illegal, then I'm going to be moving to a different regulatory environment. And I think they will see that with a lot of other people that are going to not want to deal with this draconian regulation. So, and they know this too. And the US is a kind of, it's built on the idea that enterprise, people left alone to build their own enterprise is the best outcome for society at large, right? And they've been extremely successful at doing so. And there's arguments to why they're being less successful at it now, and you can put that, but it's still sort of one of the best places to do business in the world. Maybe Singapore is better, but it's like I guess it's being put to the test, because some of these things do mean relinquishing some of the control that they're able to have with some things, and if what they're trying to do is really protect the end consumers, which is what they say they're trying to do, then like that's also being put to like a real test. Like how much can they pretend that that's the case when really they're just making it so exchanges and different things don't even want to do any business with people if they find out you're from the United States.
Yeah. I mean, I've and this may be like, you should definitely check this one out. Like the Citadel, I've done a piece on that. They're bringing real estate on chain, and they've got some interesting ideas, on where this could go, like how you could like get architects and developers to work together in a DAO to develop a property, and like some really cool ideas and all that. And they're basically bringing real estate on chain, but because of securities, and I don't know what the exact details are, they're unable to sell their tokens in the United States, or like US citizens are not allowed to hold them or something like that. So I think that's not the only example, I think.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's supposed to be for consumer protection, but like that facade is not going to be for long.
Not really. No, not really. Yeah. So let's maybe like this whole like governance voting system. Are you going to make a template out of that? Is that one thing you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, at its current rate, it's actually like the cool part about it is that it's not like this complex smart contracts. It's just like cranking out the rate of inflation. So it's, it's much higher than what you're like, that every year it doubles. That's actually like, you can do that with our current smart contract.
Yeah.
Because the one that how I was proposing it was specifically based on a period of time that, like, the value of a contribution, the half-life of that would be each doubling period of the token. So I was imagining that in the first years, getting everything, bootstrapping everything, getting 0 to 1, the value of a contribution early is worth more. So it might be that like it's only like a 25% inflation for the first 4 years, and then it goes to like 50%, and then it goes to 100% year over year. But I was thinking of it in terms of time. I think you in your proposal, you were thinking of it as like each contribution generates new tokens that people are giving out. So you are kind of, whereas my metric is on time, your metric is on some external event that you're then putting into the contract.
Like value creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you also talked about that in your piece. You also talked about like contribution. How could you issue tokens with like contribution? Then you ran into this issue where like, how do you actually measure contribution? Because that's again then like a very subjective or like centralized thing that you have, right?
Yeah, and I guess at a current rate, like the best that you can do is just be transparent, right? And like say these are the metrics for the contribution. And I think the current DeFi platforms that are out right now, like the balancers, the Uniswaps, Aave, like the way that they have it is we have a problem that we're valuing at this amount of tokens. Can you come in and tell us if you can solve it, or what is your proposal for it, right? And so it's this kind of contractor, this request for proposals model that exists in construction today and a few other industries.
Anywhere, software, yeah. You would have that, and maybe with that you could determine like a universal market price for contributions. I don't know, that'd be cool if you'd have like in a way you don't, but like if you have like a Uniswap where you could like a job market Uniswap kind of thing where you could trade work for tokens, then that would, like Fiverr does, like like these platforms do. At some point they like establish this price for creating a website, or for creating this and for creating that. And if you could like tap into that source, I guess, right, you could value contributions. Because if you could, you can go to Fiverr and you can look like for a social media manager to crank out tweets on a 2-day basis or something like that, right? And like craft them and crank them out and manage responses and things like that. And then you could see what the price tag is. Maybe they'll charge $50 per tweet. I've got no idea if these are correct, but then you could use that as like to value your contributions, because that's how we value tokens. Why don't we like just also value work that way, like contributions? In a way, it's done that way, right? But
the interesting thing, though, that work is kind of the market value of, for example, software developers right now are becoming more and more in demand in this current market. Right? And their market value is kind of increasing significantly over time. And like the reason that's like, it's based on market dynamics. So it's kind of like a price negotiating mechanism. Like the market price for developers is how high developers are able to negotiate the salary. So it's always a negotiation. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, but like a
traditional market maker is the same. Like there's a guy that has an order book, and he has a bid and an ask, and he matches the bid and ask, and then there's a little bit of a spread, and he takes a cut off that, right? And automated market makers are not exactly the same, but with the pooling model that they have, it's a similar model. They might not be as efficient as a traditional market maker, but in a way, this is exactly what's happening on Fiverr, right? There's a guy who says like, I'm going to develop 1,000 lines of code, and this is what I'm going to charge. And there's another guy, he's either going to undercut him or going to say like, I'm going to charge more, and that's how price is defined, right?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting model. Yeah, I guess it would work. I don't see why it wouldn't. Just like put it on chain. It's just like an escrow contract that's like, I value this amount of I value this much money to create this amount of work for me, right? Like and maybe no one does it, and then you put more money in until like someone does it, and then you establish like the market rate there.
Yeah. I've been like recently talking to a guy who's trying to build an on-chain Fiverr kind of product, right? Where like for DAOs, he kind of wants to, allow DAOs to set out bounties for work, and then people to like apply to these bounties and then get the cash in on the bounties. And I think if that were like a really big marketplace with lots of, like deals going through, then he could be like a provider of the price signal. And then if he had like some APIs where he could fetch the price for a developer, a website developer or a smart contract developer for an hour, then that'd be a really cool thing that you as a DAO with your token could then kind of tap into and say like, okay, based on current market rate, this is what your collaboration is currently worth. So you're going to get 10 tokens for that or not. I don't know, maybe we're over engineering the system, but I'm just like, I like the idea.
I mean, it's solving the issue that is at the crux of it. That's like, how do you value the value of a contribution, right? Like how do you define, which I guess is in traditional sense is how much return of investment, if you hire a developer, you give them, a $80K salary, and that gives you a return of, $120K per year, then that makes sense, right? And you have some margin to play with that within it. And so I guess it's like once the current labor markets and the current startup markets are so distorted though with VCs and things like that. So it's hard to say that we're in like really like the market that developer in this current market is actually a market value. But I mean, it is what is being paid for.
That's what they pay. Yeah.
So and it's in today's market, it is high, but I have a suspicion that it is maybe like a little bit higher than in a natural market it would be. Anyway,
maybe that's also inflated, because VCs have a lot of money at the moment, and that might be due to deflation. So they're kind of pumping it out, and therefore developers get a bit more. But we're also paying a lot for oil at the moment, which is due to inflation, I guess, in a lot of ways, right? So and other goods.
But that is the problem of DAOs, right? And then there was like and I think it was Uniswap that it was like a controversial take where someone, they ended up paying like $50,000 for a contribution then when it came out, it was like, wait, we paid $50,000 for this. I don't remember the exact story, but it was something like that where, people, and in the buzz of the moment where, people were excited, and someone put forth a proposal, and like it went through because people were just kind of like in this,
it just voted on it,
in this euphoric bull run, and so ended up funding. So but in general, right, like how you value a contribution, maybe there definitely are ways that we can use sort of credibly neutral systems to create like a more accurate market. I mean, you probably could use Fiverr if Fiverr had an open API to say like, okay, like at its current rate, a 5-star developer, whatever, someone that's built a reputation with us, charges this much, and people are happy with this exchange, right? And then if we could tap into their information, we could bring that information into our system, but they probably are closing that off. So that would be the argument for creating a Web3 version of Fiverr, a smart contract that you could just pull the current state of the market and use that in your application.
I'll pass that on to the guy that I was talking to, because I think that's a really cool idea for them. Maybe monetize that information. It's so cool how it's evolving. Yeah, the whole system. So maybe let's like one thing I also wanted to talk about is like collaboration. because you kind of said, you're building this tooling, but as part of that tooling, you're also I guess like getting asked a lot about how to actually define the tokens, right? Like the smart contract side is one thing, but also like thinking through what might be the right model. And I recently talked to a guy from an investment firm, and what his statement was, like in the beginning, they thought that tokenomics would just be this like blueprint. Once you have it figured out, then you just copy and paste it for everyone, and everybody uses the same model. But that's not how it actually turned out to be. It's more like tokens and tokenomics models, they like evolve as quickly as the software or as the protocols. That's what he said, right? And I tend to agree with that statement. And so like you kind of have these templates out there, but like a lot of the, I guess the other stuff comes from actually defining and thinking through how people can actually find the best model that works for them, for the value that they are creating, for the product market fit that they have, and all that kind of stuff, how you can define the right thing for that. So I was kind of like, that's definitely something you'll be thinking about a lot, and so will we. So I was interested to just chat about kind of what collaborations Valorize and Tokenomics DAO would have. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. Like it's interesting because we want to scale in a more sort of, in a SaaS type of fashion, right? Like where we want to, ideally, we would not have like this consulting arm, right? And maybe we do, but that wouldn't be the kind of the main thing that we're doing. The reason for that, right, is because consulting basically is like it's not an exponential increase. You can't just throw more people. Yeah. You're capped by the amount of people, right?
Yes.
As opposed to a software where
scales much better. Yeah.
The amount of it's exponential, right? Like and that's why software tends to get VC interest and stuff like that, right? Because you have this sort of asymmetric potential to do it. So we're definitely from how the project's kind of developed up to now, and the people who have in the community, this is kind of the direction that we're hoping to go in. However, right, like most of our clients are asking all these questions, and like for the first couple of clients, we were basically spending hours on the phone. It was close to like, I think at minimum we could get it to like 3, maybe 4 phone calls, but I was very surprised to how many questions people had. And even though we had the tool already to do a lot of things for them, it was like the decisions that was stunting them. So what we basically were thinking that a solution for that would to have partners, similar to you, that you are kind of a tokenomics consulting thing. And it might be in some cases that like a simple token would be would be enough to satisfy the kind of the token mechanics model, or like how we could develop, or use your expertise from consulting with people to kind of problems that are people trying to solve with tokens, and how we can create sort of a template that'll satisfy, the 80-20, the 80% of the people that are not going to need a highly customized token. I think there will always be people on the 20% moving the field forward, and not basically satisfied with like a cut and dry solution. But it's kind of like the WordPress model, where for I think it's 60% of the internet is built on WordPress, or 50 or 40, whatever. A big chunk of the internet is built on WordPress, because it actually satisfies like 80% of the use cases, right? And and if you need a really complex application, well, of course you're going to hire a team of developers. Then but that's not what WordPress is made for, right?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Okay, so I get that point. Yeah, you see yourself more as like providing the tools in the first place, but then also building out these tools in a way that you don't have to spend 4 hours with them, talking them through, but you could maybe spend 2. That would be your next goal, and then you'll get it down to 1, and then maybe to 30 minutes, because in the process you could just like refer to a lot of content that's out there. And we had a recent discussion on our DAO, and you joined it. It was about the NGMI score that it's just an idea that we haven't implemented it yet, but a guy in our community, he was interested in creating this evaluation framework for tokens, and we kind of discussed it because I found it interesting, and he went into all these different things that you would do when you, as an investor, maybe want to buy into a token, right? You'd look at the supply, the fully diluted valuations. You'd look at how much the VC's got in comparison to what it launched at, what price it is currently at, and like all these different things, like how many more, what's the emission, and what's the how does it get minted? You would look into all that, and then we came to the point where we then discussed kind of how do you actually find out if a token is maybe a Ponzi or a pyramid scheme, or like a zero-sum game, like one of these things. And I wrote an article about it, and we did a podcast about it too. In that we kind of explored these different things, and we said like, maybe like calling it Ponzi or a pyramid or zero-sum game or whatever there might be is maybe too difficult. Let's just call it the not going to make it score, and we'll have.
I love that, by the way.
We'll have a scale from like 0, which is maybe that's a bit confusing, but like 0 is like it's certainly going to make it, and then you have 100 is not going to make it. And so we came up with a bunch of questions, and these questions allow you then to evaluate a protocol. And in the article, I went through Ethereum, but I guess you could apply it to many others. And we just had a few of these questions, and you found that interesting to apply to maybe also your tooling, that you could like reverse engineer that, or like use it the other way around to, I guess, like get or use these questions to then hone in on how does the value that they want to create actually help them to design their token. Because a lot of this NGMI score, a lot of the Ponzi or pyramid schemes is about what value do they actually create. So that's something you definitely have to answer and go through to find out what you can use the token for, right? So yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of that was where my mind is at, right? Like I'm constantly thinking of how to apply these questions and these questions that people have had in terms of creating a token. And so like the joke was as you're building out your token in the interface, it giving a pop-up that says, hey, you're approaching a not gonna make it score, If you keep going this route, you might not make it. Yeah. Are you sure?
Be careful with that. You need to create a lot of value to issue that many tokens. Yeah.
Here's a book on ethics that you can check out.
That'd be funny.
But I guess the direction that, like I was saying, the direction that we're thinking of going is just, one question at a time, having someone kind of think through that one question. Like, for example, like initial supply, right? Like it's, the only thing that initial supply has to do with is like, does it accurately represent the kind of the initial division of tokens? If you don't want to divide 5 things into 7 pieces, if you can't divide the sub things. But anyway, but things like issuance rate, things like how often you can mint, what should be the maximum total supply in the future, should it be completely unlimited, so on and so forth, that has a lot more implications. So just dragging you on, like taking you one by one, and then maybe thinking how we can add some metrics for evaluating what your decision will lead to. So that that not going to make it score like this questionnaire that you had built up for yourself for tokens, I thought was a really interesting proposal.
That'd be cool. And then I guess what I would find interesting then is like if you would apply that into your contract generating mechanism, you would then take the feedback that basically the clients that have gone through this thing and kind of use that to kind of send it back into the score, right? So that we can then see how they have chosen based on the information that they've gotten, and also see how their token has performed, maybe together with the value, and maybe connect that up, and then that would give some interesting results to improve the whole thing in the long run. That goes back to, I would love that. That goes back to the idea of like increasing the rate of experimentation that these tokens are being launched with, and then using those learnings to create better foundations for the future. I think that'd be really cool. The whole experimentation thing, if we can solve that, or you kind of have like a virtual machine ecosystem where you can like spin up this thing and it like brings up all these actors, which we talked to a guy on like simulation. It's like super difficult to do. I think the experimentation will happen with small communities. What happens when like, I think Constitution DAO was like an awesome experiment, right? And it was like people, real money, real people, just putting it together. And actually the most interesting part of Constitution DAO, I swear, was the legal channel in that Discord. It was like how everyone, like all the, it was like, it basically gave a really clear snapshot of like the state of regulation right now. And it's like, and what we were talking about earlier, we cannot say that it's partial ownership, absolutely, like this is what's allowed, this is and I was like, man, it's such a shame that we have all these tools and we could basically make it represent partial ownership of the Constitution and build the tooling around it. But we can't, right? But anyway, that was an interesting experiment, and then there's several others, and like the big ones obviously, but there's a lot of small ones and small communities that are up and coming that are also worth trying out new stuff. I think that's really cool. I have to monitor that. Cool. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to bring up before we kind of like wrap it up?
No, I mean, I guess I can do some promotion if you're interested in like the engineering side of tokenomics. If you're interested in the theoretical side of tokenomics, I think Tokenomics DAO, I was so excited when I found it. And also, by the way, this podcast I think is going to be, I think it's quite new yet, and I don't know what the statistics are, but it was like exactly what I was looking for when I found it. I was like so excited that I found it, and it's funny that I was able to get in touch with you and set this up. So like I think for people that are maybe more interested in the engineering side of tokenomics and actually making these things, I would love for them to come to Valorize and have these conversations and maybe implement some of the ideas that come out of Tokenomics DAO for what would be a good kind of basic governance token for the majority use case, not a super highly specialized use case, but for the majority, and implement them and actually, help them get to some level of experimentation in the wild. So please join. Valorize.app is the.
I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
Is the link, and you can sign up there, and you can go to the Discord at the bottom.
Yeah. That's cool. I think we'll get back to you once we launch our token, because that's definitely going to be one of the things that we'd love to use the tools for that. And man, I really appreciate you coming on, being our very first interview. It was really an interesting conversation for me, at least. I found it super valuable, super cool. I had some really good ideas just that popped up during the conversation, and appreciate it. Love to do that again at some point in the future. See how we've taken this.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, and definitely I know that we'll stay in touch, and we'll continue.
Absolutely,
together, hopefully, yeah.